Good evening. Pro-establishment lawmakers have urged the pan-Democrats not to set too many conditions if and when they're invited to meet Beijing officials to discuss political reform. The Democratic Party's Wu Chi-wai insisted that talks are pointless if the central government insists on screening out chief executive candidates. Emily Sear reports.
This weekend, Zhang Dezhang, Beijing's top official in charge of Hong Kong affairs, has been summoning officials and lawmakers to Shenzhen to discuss the city's constitutional development. Yesterday, it was the turn of Chief Executive Yeung and the three ministers in charge of political reform. And today, the guest list included Liberal Party's James Tian. Tian quoted Zhang as saying that the city's leader must be someone who loves the country and loves Hong Kong, adding that not all pan-Democrats are necessarily non-patriots. Regarding the opposition camp's demand that the government must propose a political reform package that meets international standards, Zhang apparently reiterated that universal suffrage for the 2017 chief executive vote must stick to the basic law. He also pointed out that so-called international standards differ from one place to another, such as in the UK and the US. None of the pan-Democrats have been invited to meet Zhang yet, but the Democratic Party's Wu Chi-wai said even if they did, there will be conditions. He said there's no point talking if Beijing insists on using the nominating committee to filter out critical but popular candidates.
We have a baseline. The baseline is there should not be any political screening. If the government would like to have further communication with general public in Hong Kong, and they have to show some sign that political screening is not the baseline for the central government.
In May, the Democratic Party postponed a meeting with Liaison Office Director Zhang Xiaoming, while Civic Party lawmakers have insisted they will only meet Beijing officials as a group and not individually. Pro-establishment lawmakers urged their opposition colleagues not to set so many conditions to hinder talks.
If everybody is worried that they don't want to be the first to meet and they want a whole group, then, as you all know, a meeting with 3 people usually are more productive than a meeting with 20. A good party, political party that takes Hong Kong forward, need to have both political ideology and political courage.
LegCo President Zhang Yuxing later said that Zhang could not arrange a meeting with the pan-Democrats this time, while Alliance for True Democracy convener Joseph Chang said opposition lawmakers are ready to meet Beijing officials anytime. He said it was in the hands of the central government. The government submitted its 2 political reform reports to the National People's Congress Standing Committee on Tuesday, and Beijing is expected to lay out legal principles either next month or in October to set the tone for the city's constitutional reform.
The anti-Occupy Central campaign entered its second day today, after gathering nearly 200,000 signatures yesterday. While there are reports of staff at voting booths being harassed, the organizers say it will not affect their campaign for peace. Yeung reports.
According to the Alliance for Peace and Democracy, its anti-Occupy Central campaign is off to a good start. It announced last night that the first day of the month-long campaign saw 200,000 people sign up, and it's well on its way to the ultimate goal of 800,000. Convener of the Alliance, Robert Chow, noted today that Occupy Central's so-called referendum only managed to gather 700,000 physical votes in 9 days. Despite the promising start, the organizers say the process didn't go entirely smoothly. I was upset to hear that some of our booths experienced harassment yesterday, Chow said. Staff at some stations said people came over to shout at them, as well as taking photos of voters. Workers at a booth in Kowloon City had stones and glass bottles thrown at them. Chow said he couldn't understand why a campaign for peace would attract trouble and warned that his staff will call the police if they experience any more harassment. The legitimacy of the campaign is also being questioned. One newspaper claims staff at certain booths did not ask for identification before people filled in their forms. leader of student group Scholarism, which staged a rehearsal for Occupy Central on the 1st of July, came out to complain about the campaign.
I think the number of signatures is not really a fact because some people, they do not know what's Occupy Central, or even one person will sign for, I think, 20 signatures. I think it's not really a fact. Yeah.
Chow explained that due to the rushed schedule, some staff may not have been properly briefed about the procedure or may have seen someone they knew and forgot to ask for identification. He said all staff were reminded last night that the proper identification procedures must be followed, no matter what. However, he insisted that only a very small number of forms had this problem, and they can be removed. Winna Wong, ATV News.
Former Chief Secretary Anson Chan and Democratic Party founder Martin Lee say their week-long visit to the UK was fruitful and encouraging.
Shame on you, chanted dozens of protesters that gathered outside the airport this afternoon as they condemned local political heavyweights Anson Chan and Martin Lee for complaining to top British officials about the problems surrounding its former colony's political reform. The demonstrators accused Chan, Hong Kong's former number 2 official, and Lee, who founded the Democratic Party, of being traitors. However, the political stalwarts appeared unfazed as they briefed reporters on what they had achieved during their week in Britain. They described their trip as productive and encouraging, as they were given the chance to express their concerns over Beijing's growing influence in the former British colony, something they had wanted to bring to the attention of the UK government. Their visit came as British Prime Minister David Cameron came under heavy criticism from pro-democracy activists for not speaking out about Beijing's controversial white paper on Hong Kong when Premier Li Keqiang was visiting last month. They accused Cameron of staying quiet because Li was in the country to sign $184 billion worth of trade deals, even though Beijing's white paper, which asserts complete authority over the SAR, breaches the 1984 Sino-British Joint Declaration.
Is that the British government has an undoubted responsibility towards Hong Kong. The British policy on Hong Kong can be summarized in 3 words: more China trade. This is shameful. They have to make up their minds and see whether, because of China trade, they will just kowtow.
Chan said it's especially encouraging that Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg had promised them that Britain will honor its 1984 pledge to mobilize the international community and pursue every legal and other avenue available if China violates the one country, two systems principle. In a related development, Henry Tang, the former number 2 official under then Chief Executive Donald Tsang, waded into the debate over the city's political reform today. He urged Leung Chun-ying's administration to beg to listen to the views of the people after hundreds of thousands took to the streets during the July 1st pro-democracy mass rally. Tang, however, is not optimistic Hong Kong can achieve genuine universal suffrage for the 2017 chief executive election.
It is not easy. I do not expect we will get total consensus, but I do hope that everyone can be realistic and practical and achieve a 2/3 majority in LegCo so that we can continue to implement the one man, one vote for the chief executive in 2017.
Tang, who lost the race for the top job to Leung in 2012, reiterated that he has no interest in running again in 2017.
Financial Secretary John Tsang warned today of a property bubble due to a rise in demand for smaller and cheaper flats. Bolan reports.
Once a quiet village, Feng Yun in Tai Po is now swarming with busloads of prospective buyers from Mont Vert, a new high-rise development right next door. But none of the prospective buyers will be allowed to inspect the actual flats, as developer Cheung Kong argues that it's not safe to let anyone into the building site. While that might be breaking the law, the buyers don't seem to care as they're drawn to the relatively cheap asking price, tiny studio flats with no kitchens for a mere $2 million. As more developers adopt a downsizing strategy to make new flats seem cheaper, the government was quick to warn the public of the risks involved. Writing in his blog today, Financial Secretary John Tsang said he's noticed the demand for the tiny flats is growing. He pointed out that once the property market goes into recession, buyers may suffer if they can't keep their financial commitments. He urged people taking out mortgages to pay attention to the bank's interest rates. On a related note, Yeung said he's relieved to see the double stamp duty bill passed by lawmakers in the 11th hour last week. The property cooling measure had been in place since February last year, but the government has finally put it into the law to show its determination to bring down home prices. The finance chief insisted the double stamp duty and other levies aimed at curbing speculation are necessary to counter the risks of a market bubble and uphold Hong Kong's financial stability. But many local and overseas businesses still fear their operations will be disrupted if the Occupy Central protest goes ahead and the financial district streets are blocked. Even former Monetary Authority Chief Joseph Yam waded into the debate today. Yam said it's hard to predict the impact of the protest, although he admitted it may cause long-term damage if the world sees Hong Kong as an unreliable place to do business in. The central banker added that he doesn't want to see that happen, but so far he hasn't heard of any foreign businesses pulling out because of the looming protest. Leung, ATV News.
Overseas, Ukrainian rescue workers say they've recovered 196 bodies from the wreckage of the Malaysia Airlines plane that crashed last week. But Kiev has accused pro-Russian militiamen at the site of the crash of trying to destroy evidence of an international crime. Anne-Marie Sim reports.
Observers from the OSCE security agency moved gingerly through fields reeking of the decomposing corpses of those on board Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, trying to secure the sprawling site in the hope that a credible investigation of the disaster can be conducted. But their access was again hampered by armed men from the forces of the self-declared People's Republic of Donetsk, who questioned the authority of the Western-funded group, which is often accused of meddling in Russian affairs. The deputy head of the OSCE mission made it clear to the separatist leader on site that they had permission to be there.
I have an agreement with your minister. If you say me that you do not respect it, I will not run against your order, but I will report back to your minister.
The observers complained about over-vigilant self-defense fighters at the scene, but admitted they were providing security.
Well, obviously, the time spent there today was longer than yesterday. And in addition, we were able to traverse a far larger area than yesterday. Having said that, our cars were denied access on the road leading through the crash area. Hence, we had to access by foot. But again, we did see a larger area. There's very little security on the perimeter of the crash site. We did notice that when you arrived today, there was a cordon of armed security personnel on both sides of the roadway. Some of them masked and armed. We didn't feel any harassment this time as we did yesterday, but it was somewhat of an intimidating environment nonetheless.
Securing the site and preserving evidence is crucial for investigators to try to piece together what and who caused the airliner to crash. But some officials suggest the scene has been compromised just 2 days on. As the operation to recover bodies continued, Ukraine claims the rebels, who Kiev and the US have accused of blowing the plane out of the sky with a missile, have removed dozens of bodies from the site and taken them to a morgue in the rebel-held city of Donetsk. But the rebels, locals who object to the Western-backed overthrow of the previous government, say they have not touched the site. The OSCE thinks otherwise.
We observed for the first time today bodies being removed and packed into body bags. Typically, these bags were placed on both sides of the closed roadway. As some of you observed, some of the bags were open and exposed to the elements. We don't quite know why.
The fragments of flight MH17 and the bodies of victims in the tragic crash were scattered over a space of several square kilometers, including a residential area in eastern Ukraine. On the first day, I removed everything. It smelled too much in the yard, and those pieces that were here I carried to the site of the crash, this resident said. The Boeing 777 was flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. It fell between the East Ukraine regions of Luhansk and Donetsk on Thursday. All 298 people died. Both Ukraine and the rebels accuse each other of shooting it down. The Russian Defense Ministry has accused the West of waging an information war against Moscow. It has challenged Ukraine to produce details of what its anti-aircraft systems were doing at the time, since its army is equipped with exactly the same kind of missile launchers Kiev accuses the rebels of using to shoot down the plane. Russia also blames the West for the current chaos in Ukraine, which erupted after the US and EU helped overthrow the elected government earlier this year.
At least 40 Palestinians were killed overnight as Israel escalated its offensive on the Gaza Strip. That takes the Palestinian death toll in the nearly 2-week-long conflict to almost 400. Here's Yeung.
With no truce in sight, Israel continues to pound Gaza with airstrikes. On the ground, more troops are being sent into the Palestinian territory, backed by mortar fire. Gaza residents say it's the heaviest shelling since the fighting began almost 2 weeks ago. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed and more than 2,000 wounded. In retaliation, Hamas militants have been firing rockets into Israel, although their effect is nowhere near as devastating.
Occupation no more!
There's been outrage across the world to the latest assault on the Gaza Strip. In London, England, about 15,000 protesters marched from Downing Street to the Israeli embassy, calling for an end to Israel's military action. There were similar scenes in Sydney, Australia.
Well, everybody angry, and if you're not angry, you're not human. We're talking about humanity. We support all the human beings everywhere around the world.
Hundreds of Israeli peace activists and supporters gathered in Tel Aviv.
I believe that it's very important to resist this military operation, this war, the carnage in Gaza, because it's unnecessary and it's inhumane.
In France, pro-Palestinian protesters clashed with police during a rally. The protest in Paris was banned by French President François Hollande after demonstrators tried to storm 2 synagogues last week, but the rally went ahead anyway. Yeung, ATV News.
Sport news. Rory McIlroy is swinging closer to a win at the British Open after stretching his lead to 6th after the 3rd round. It was a wet and rainy start at Royal Liverpool Golf Club in Hoylake, but that didn't stop Rory McIlroy from widening his lead by 6 shots at the British Open. Once again, the Northern Irishman began the round with a bogey, but came back with birdies on the 5th, 11th and 14th holes. McIlroy was tied at 12 under with American Ricky Fowler, but gained a huge advantage with this eagle putt on the 16th. The 25-year-old then rounded off a spectacular 3rd round by eagling the 18th to card a total of 16 under 200. Fowler, who is the only player to finish in the top 5 in both majors this season, made 8 birdies and 4 bogeys. The American finished today with a 10 under 206. Sergio Garcia of Spain recovered from a bad start and is 7 shots adrift. He's joined by Dustin Johnson at 9 under. In cycling, riders took on huge summit climbs in the Alps during the 14th stage of the Tour de France from Grenoble to Rissol. Poland's Rafał Majka powered away from a strong group of 17 cyclists and managed to hold off the chasing pack to win the race. Vincenzo Nibali of Italy finished 24 seconds behind. The Italian's overall lead has been extended to 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Finally, the weather forecast for the next few days. Mainly fine apart from isolated showers. Tomorrow, temperatures will range from 28 to 32 degrees. Here's a look at the weather around the world. That's all the news for now. Thanks for watching ATV. I'm Raymond Yeung. Good night.
Coming up, Newsline. All about documentary. Finding Chinese style in every corner of Taiwan.
There's smaller boats in the way
and you're not supposed to hit anybody, but it happens every time.
Just scratched my foot on the way down. It's the spiky bits on the legs that are quite painful.
From Sydney to Tokyo, by any means. Tomorrow night at 10. What happens out there is real. Get the latest European news and current affairs. Whatever happens, when it happens. You are always the first to know. Check in current news. European Journal, Tuesday night at 8. Every year, their warm hearts enlighten our minds. ATV Hong Kong Loving Heart Selection Campaign 2014 is now open for nomination. The 5th year, we need more positive energy.
喺職場上冇合唔合格嘅畢業生，只有合唔合適嘅僱員。
香港中學文憑清楚顯示學生嘅學業水平同埋能力。
評級分1至5級，最高第5級，又有等級描述同例子。僱主可按照唔同工作崗位嘅要求，
根據學生喺各科所達到嘅水平，
同學生嘅學習概覽嚟聘請僱員。
香港中學文憑認可。
The government has taken the lead in recognizing the diploma in recruitment.
ATV World Spectacular.
Abbott, please, we're begging to be students of Shaolin.
Learning martial arts at Shaolin Temple, making amazing friends.
Concentrate on what you're doing. This isn't a game. From now on, you and I, we will practice like brothers.
When enemies take action, Kung Fu Master is ready to fight back.
Kill them all! It's about time you got here. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Kung Fu Master Revenge 1, Wednesday night at 8:30.
山美，水美，人更美。走遍大地神州，最美多彩贵州。
绿绿的归阳，爽爽的归阳，回到了童年时光。
爽爽的贵阳。
This program only reflects the personal views of the program hosts and/or the individual contributors.
Good evening, this is Newsline. I'm Michael Chigani. Tonight, deal or no deal on political reforms. With me is Emily Lau, the chairwoman of the Democratic Party. Now, Emily Lau, thanks for coming again. I invite you every time there's a huge political controversy, as there is again now. As I said, you know, C.Y. Leung has given his report to the central authorities, and Carrie Lam, the Chief Secretary, has given a separate report to you and others in the Legislative Council. The next step is we look at these reports, we move on to the next stage. As I said in the intro, Emily Lau, deal or no deal as you look at it today? Can we reach a deal on political reform?
Well, of course we can reach a deal. Our position is very clear. We would like to have an election for the chief executive, which is by universal suffrage and a genuinely democratic election, whereby there will be no unreasonable restrictions and the voters will have a genuine choice. But regrettably, the report compiled by Mrs. Carrie Lam does not really present the full picture. There are many people who have very strong views, clearly articulated views, views which were expressed in the civil referendum held by the Occupy Central Trio from the 22nd to the 29th
About
of June.
800,000 people signed.
Yes, almost 800,000 people voted. And of those, the very vast majority said if the package produced by the government ultimately does not comply with international standards, LegCo should vote it down. And what is international standard? It's not a great mystery. It's just that the election method should provide the voters with a genuine choice.
Of candidates, you mean?
Of candidates, that's right. Well, what do I mean? You say, well, they may give you a few, but actually even the choices, the number is at stake, because in the report it says, oh, some people, quite a lot, said it should be up to only 2 to 3 candidates, but others have some other suggestions and did not even name a figure. So if they confine it to 2 or 3 candidates, and also if Beijing comes out to rule out civil nomination, rule out nomination by political parties, and just confine it to the nominating committee, but having the nominating committee very narrowly constituted, like the current election committee.
Then there's no deal.
And then also, to make it even worse, they may adopt the proposal of the DAB or the Federation of Trade Unions, which are the most pro-communist groups in Hong Kong, and they say that the nominating committee would vote as a whole, and only those people who get half of the votes
can become candidates.
If that's the case, there's no deal. Not only no deal, but it will be Occupy Central.
I know this is what you've said, because you know, your instant reaction to the two reports was a very unfavorable one. I remember you said a few days back. But Raymond Tam, the Secretary for Constitutional Amendment Affairs, actually said a couple of days ago that he was not optimistic, and that if he was to put a proposal on the table today, it would be voted down in the Legislative Council.
So why would he want to put something that